Arrival at Camp Aliceville, heat, wire, and the sound of fizz. September 3, 1944. Camp Aliceville, Alabama, a flat, patient place of red clay and pine where the summer had not yet let go. The air hung thick above the rows of Nissen huts and the double strands of barbed wire. Cicadas rasped like static. A watchtower's silhouette cut a black tooth into the sky. In the compound, the whistle of the bottling plant would not, at first, have seemed anything more than an odd new instrument, until the men who heard it realized what the clanging and the hiss meant. Oberleutnant Karl Becker had stood at the wire for nearly an hour that morning. He wore the plain gray of the prisoner group, collar tabs removed, his Feldgrau tunic buttoned against humidity. He was 32, hollowed by a year away from home, and the small scar across his left cheek looked older than it was. Through the fence he watched American soldiers move like ordered ants, Corporal James, Jim O'Neill, M1 slung over his shoulder, polished helmet catching the weak sun, Private First Class Thomas Avery driving a GMC truck with a load of bottles, Lieutenant Colonel Robert H. Stanton in khaki, cap brim low, clipboard in hand. The men in the compounds had practiced patience like another food group. Ration rolls were studied, barbecues were rare, and letters from the fatherland arrived in trickles. Karl remembered the winter before, the thin bread, the rationed coffee, the metallic aftertaste of ersatz. He remembered the deep, astonished silence in a village where the bread ran out and men counted days by the sound of distant artillery. Here, in Alabama, the world smelled different, not of coal smoke and horse dung, but of axle grease, diesel, and, incongruously, sugar. The new building next to Hut 12 bore the stenciled mark of a private company. A crude banner hung from a scaffolding, hand-painted, Coca-Cola, for troops. It did not claim to be for prisoners. No one in uniforms with brass and stripes would have ordered that. Yet the presence of heavy, humming machines, a glass washer like a small cathedral, a pasteurizer with its curved brass belly, a carbonator that sighed and spat like a sleeping animal, altered the rhythm of the camp. Men who'd only known soda in wartime postcards began to gather at the fence. Feldwebel Hans Meyer, a stocky NCO with a gravel voice and a habit of rolling a pencil between his fingers, pressed his forehead to the wire. "Was is das?" he whispered to Karl, but the question was rhetorical. Both men smelled the syrup before they saw the bottles, a sweet, treacly steam that strummed memory like a taut wire. Behind the plant, a line of polished glass bottles blinked in the sun, crowned with metal caps that gleamed like small medals. The bottles moved along a conveyor with the indifferent precision of American manufacturing, fill, cap, label, set down. The label, familiar even in a language they were not supposed to read, struck them, Coca-Cola. The script itself was an emblem. Lieutenant Colonel Stanton, who had been with the camp since spring, noted the men gathering and made a decision. Inside his pocket was a letter from a company representative. Coca-Cola bottlers had been sending syrup and equipment to military bases and receiving facilities to maintain morale among the troops. The Army, juggling logistics and public relations, accepted. The plan was simple: soldiers got a cold bottle in a time when cold and sweet were luxury. The company wanted to help, and the Army wanted anything that might keep men steady. Someone, somewhere, had suggested the extra goodwill that might come from letting prisoners have a taste on certain days. At noon a truck reversed to the plant's loading bay. Staff Sergeant William "Bill" Hargrove stepped down, cap tipped back, wiping his brow with the back of a sooty hand. He had overseen supply trains in North Africa and had the look of a man who trusted boxes more than people. He checked a clipboard, then approached the fence with a small, deliberate smile the prisoners had learned to read like a signal. "Lines out," he called, using the language the camp now used for the scheduled distribution. Guards unlocked a side gate and the first queue of prisoners shuffled forward, their boots whispering on dusty earth. The men moved with the stiff, careful choreography of those who have been taught new rules, hands out of pockets, eyes forward, posture correct. A young interpreter, Corporal James H. Rivers, translated instructions, his accent a lilt between Southern and soldier schooled. "One per man. Stand in line. No trading." He watched the faces as each bottle was handed over, an astonishment that hovered between incredulity and mourning. The first man to receive a bottle, Private Heinrich Vogel, 19, a baker from Hanover, grasped the glass like a relic. Heinrich turned the bottle in his calloused hand as if it might be fragile glass from a church. He cracked the cap against the rim of his hand with a practiced twist and the sound that escaped was small, crystalline, the hiss of carbonation freeing itself into the open. He closed his eyes and drank. The sweetness hit him like sunlight. Around him, men caught the smell of cola and exhaled long, complicated breaths, a sigh of hunger, a gasp of memory, a laugh cut short. In the scoring silence that followed, 100 tiny noises issued, corks on metal caps, the clink of glass, swallowed curses in low voices, the sharp caw of a distant crow. Carl watched Heinrich and felt something in his chest loosen as if a seam had been undone. He remembered his mother's kitchen, a bowl of sugared milk, the clatter of spoons, the laugh of a sister. He had not allowed himself such small domestic recollections for a long time, they felt treasonous and beautiful. Behind him, Hans adjusted his sleeve and reached for the wire. The bottle did not only bring sugar. It brought a living proof that the world he had known still existed somewhere, unbroken in small ways. Meanwhile, in the American mess hall, soldiers lined up for their own ration bottle. Troops exchanged the look of men who had been given permission to enjoy something the enemy now tasted too. Some were uneasy, others shrugged. Captain James R. Wallace, whose job had recently included liaising with civilian contractors, watched the proceedings with a guarded pride. "Keep it orderly," he told the guards. "Don't let it become a spectacle." The men in the compounds, however, had already begun to tell stories that moved faster than orders. They traded whispered theories about the plant, that it was a miracle, that it was a trap, that in that syrupy steam were the secrets of American abundance. And yet, as the afternoon heat sagged and the bottles emptied, something simpler settled over both sides of the fence, a small, unnameable human pause. For a few minutes in September, with the hum of machines and the sweet residue on their tongues, prisoners and soldiers tasted the same thing, not victory, not defeat, but a fragment of a life that might one day be theirs again. Sweet diplomacy, the Coca-Cola Company and the war machine. For weeks after that first afternoon, the Coca-Cola plant at Camp Aliceville became part of the camp's strange rhythm, a new, steady heartbeat beneath the hum of boredom. Each morning, before the Alabama sun rose high enough to shimmer over the concertina wire, the bottling plant came alive. The hiss of carbon dioxide, the clink of glass, and the rhythmic caw-thunk of machinery echoed across the camp. Oberleutnant Becker often found himself standing at his window during roll call, staring at the rising plumes of steam that drifted from the roof. To him, it wasn't just a factory, it was an emblem of everything the war had concealed. Inside those walls was abundance, sugar, glass, metal, cold water, even laughter. Outside was the regimented scarcity he'd come to know too well. He couldn't shake the absurd thought that this soft drink had become a sort of propaganda weapon. He wasn't wrong. While Becker and his fellow prisoners drank from bottles etched with "Property of the U.S. Army," executives at the Coca-Cola Company headquarters in Atlanta were running one of the most ambitious morale operations of the war. In 1942, General Dwight D. Eisenhower had personally requested that Coca-Cola accompany American troops overseas, at 5 cents a bottle, no matter the cost of shipping or production. The order came from the top: every man in uniform should have access to a bottle of Coca-Cola wherever he is, and whatever it costs the company. The result was industrial mobilization. Coca-Cola built 64 bottling plants across every theater of war, from North Africa to the South Pacific, staffed by technical observers, who were company men wearing military khaki. The effort wasn't purely patriotic, it was a masterpiece of marketing camouflage. The more the troops drank, the more they associated that fizzy sweetness with home, safety, and the America they were fighting for. Back in Alabama, the symbolism wasn't lost on Colonel Stanton either. To him, the bottles were a kind of psychological diplomacy, one that worked without speeches or pamphlets. When the Red Cross inspectors arrived in October, they noted that the POWs were well-fed, well-housed, and even provided with certain civilian comforts. Among the listed comforts was a local beverage plant producing soft drinks. The irony was not missed by the Germans. In their homeland, Allied bombing had reduced cities to ash. Civilians rationed every crumb, children scraped soot from chimneys to trade for fuel. And here, in the heart of the enemy's industrial land, there were factories dedicated entirely to sweetness. Feldwebel-Meyer found the contradiction unbearable at first. In the fatherland, he muttered one day, bottle in hand, we cannot make bread, and here, they make bubbles. Yet, he didn't throw it away. Gradually, resentment softened into reluctant curiosity. When the guards weren't watching too closely, a few of the POWs began to talk with American workers at the bottling line, mostly through improvised English, hand gestures, and laughter. One of them, a lanky American mechanic named Joe Tillman, discovered that a German prisoner named Klaus had been an engineer at a brewery near Munich before the war. When Joe's carbonator malfunctioned, Klaus offered advice through the fence, drawing a quick schematic in the dust with a stick. The fix worked. From that day on, the plant foreman allowed Klaus and a few others to assist with maintenance under guard supervision. In time, the bottling building became an unlikely crossroads, a shared workspace where enemies, stripped of insignia, worked shoulder to shoulder in the noise and the heat. The only common language was the machinery itself. Every bottle rolled down the conveyor belt like a small, glass truce. But for Becker, the officer, it was more complicated. He began to keep notes, small scribbles in a smuggled ledger. He wrote of the sweet American illusion of the empire of sugar and bubbles. He wondered aloud, in neat German script, whether this comfort was the true face of the enemy's strength, not its tanks or planes, but its ability to make luxury seem ordinary. The notes would one day survive the war, discovered in a trunk in Bremen. But at the time, they were only thoughts, murmured to himself while watching his men lick the last sweetness from their bottles. And yet, even Becker could not deny what it did to morale. The tension between captor and captive eased in small, unspoken ways. The guards grew friendlier, the men more docile, their routines smoother. Violence gave way to conversation, suspicion to routine civility. When Christmas came, Coca-Cola's Atlanta office sent a telegram authorizing a special distribution. Each man in the camp, American and German alike, received 2 bottles instead of 1. The POW choir sang, Still Nacht, their voices rising in German harmony over the hum of bottling machines. Across the wire, the American chaplain bowed his head as the soldiers joined softly in English. For a few fleeting minutes, the war seemed to hesitate. Then the moment passed, as all such moments do. The lights dimmed, the songs ended, and the plant shut down for the night. But the echo, the blend of languages, the hiss of carbonation, and the faint, lingering scent of syrup, stayed in the air long after the singing stopped. The Germans went to sleep that night with sugar on their tongues and a strange, indefinable emotion in their chests, something between confusion and hope. Letters Home, a taste of America behind barbed wire. By early 1945, the red Alabama soil had cooled beneath frost, and the war across the Atlantic was entering its brutal final act. Camp Aliceville had grown quieter, the shouting drills fewer, the guards less rigid. What had once been a place of resentment and suspicion had turned into something resembling reluctant coexistence. Oberleutnant Karl Becker now spent his days teaching English classes to fellow prisoners in Hut 8. Words like soda fountain, movie theater, and jukebox had become curious favorites among the men, linguistic souvenirs from a culture they still didn't quite understand. Outside, the Coca-Cola plant still hissed and clattered, its familiar rhythm a kind of mechanical lullaby that everyone in camp had come to rely on. Sometimes Becker would pause mid-lesson when the faint sound of bottles clinking echoed through the thin walls. He'd glance toward the window, smile wryly, and say, "Listen carefully, gentlemen. That is the sound of American confidence." The men laughed, but there was truth in it. In January, letters began arriving from home, or what remained of it. They came on thin, gray paper, censored in black ink, heavy with despair. Mothers described empty shelves. Fathers described cold nights. Cities like Hamburg and Cologne were gone. Food, they wrote, was scarcer than ever. And yet, in Aliceville, the men drank Coca-Cola every Sunday. Feldwebel-Meyer couldn't bear the contradiction. One evening, bottle in hand, he said bitterly to Becker, "Do you think they give us this to make us forget? To make us soft?" Becker looked at him for a long time before answering. "Perhaps," he said quietly. "But maybe that's the point. War makes beasts of men. Perhaps they wish to remind us what it is to be human." Outside the hut, the plant lights glowed against the dusk, bathing the wire fence in an amber halo. To many of the POWs, that glow had become something symbolic, a paradoxical beacon of the enemy's humanity. It reminded them that the world was not entirely mad, that sweetness could still exist amid the machinery of war. By now, American guards had grown used to the sight of Germans sipping cola beneath the bleachers or trading bottle caps as keepsakes. Some guards even joined them. One, Private O'Neill, the same man Becker had seen unloading trucks months earlier, started collecting the empty caps for his kid brother back in Georgia. "Says he's gonna make wind chimes outta 'em, he told Becker once, grinning. Becker nodded, uncertain if the man was joking. For all its absurdity, the ritual of Coke had become the most powerful form of silent diplomacy in the camp. The POWs didn't talk about ideology anymore. They talked about flavor, about childhood, about the world before it had split in two. Then came the day the Red Cross photographer visited. He was there to document living conditions, to show the world, and perhaps Germany itself, that the United States treated its prisoners with decency. The image he captured was simple: two German POWs sitting on a bench, bottle of Coca-Cola between them, smiling faintly under the Alabama sun. One held the bottle as if it were a fragile thing, the other, mid-sip, looked both shy and bewildered. When the photo was published months later in an American newspaper, the caption read, "Former enemies share a taste of home, Camp Aliceville, Alabama." But in Germany, when copies eventually circulated through neutral channels, it caused confusion and outrage. How could prisoners, defeated soldiers, be living so well while the Reich starved? The Ministry of Propaganda labeled it American deceit. Yet those who saw the unaltered image knew better. It wasn't deceit, it was something far stranger, a truth that didn't fit into wartime logic. Back in the camp, Becker wrote another note in his secret ledger: "They win not only with bullets, but with bottles." By spring, rumors spread that the war was nearing its end. The guards stopped pretending they didn't read the same news the prisoners whispered about: the fall of the Rhine, the encirclement of Berlin. When Germany finally surrendered in May 1945, Camp Aliceville was nearly silent. No one cheered. No one cried. Men simply stood where they were, on parade grounds, near fences, beside the bottling plant, and looked at the sky as though expecting an answer. That night, an American sergeant unlocked the gate and carried a wooden crate toward the center of the yard. Inside were dozens of cold bottles of Coca-Cola. He set them down without ceremony and said, "For peace, gentlemen." No music played. No speeches were given. Becker walked forward first, took a bottle, and looked at its glass surface reflecting the watchtower light. Then he raised it slightly toward the guard, a toast without words. The others followed. Hundreds of men, enemies by uniform, but no longer by heart, drank quietly beneath the warm Alabama night. The sound of caps popping filled the air, echoing like a string of small, bright fireworks. Some laughed. Some cried. Some simply stared into the dark, lost in memory. When the bottles were empty, Becker placed his on the ground beside him. It caught the moonlight and shone faintly, a perfect, transparent reminder of the strange mercy they had found behind barbed wire. Months later, when the first prisoners were repatriated, they carried small things home: carved trinkets, pocket dictionaries, scraps of American newspaper, and, in some cases, empty Coca-Cola bottles carefully wrapped in rags. To the customs officers in Bremen and Hamburg, they were just souvenirs. But to the men who had lived that paradox, they were something else entirely. Proof that even in war, the simplest act of humanity could outlast the noise of empires.